Simpson here. I've got something interesting for you tonight. I got about an hour after midnight to get to where I'm trying to go, and driving the big boy today, of course. And we're going to do a master class in how to do public records requests, how to dig for public records, not just here's how to file a records request. Oh no, we're going way past that. We're going to discuss the tactics, things you can do with public records requests that aren't even related to public records, believe it or not. There's more going on there because of their very nature. This is going to go out to two different groups of people. One is my fellow peeps in the big trucks, the guys in the big boy seat like me, because we often get jacked around by local and state governments. Very seldom do the feds actively mess with us on an individual level, just like everybody else. Most of the time when you get screwed by the government, it's going to be local or state. So we're going to be spending a lot of time on that. The other group I want to talk to tonight are the activists I have a lot of respect for, and I've done a little bit of this, the cop watchers and the First Amendment audit crowd. These are the guys, people deride them as though First Amendment crash test dummies. Well, no. These are guys that are set out on, in some cases, a daily basis to prove that if you're walking down the street, you see a cop or other government official doing something funky, you are, in fact, allowed to point a camera at them and record what they're doing without getting beat up, without getting thrown in jail. And these guys prove that on a daily basis by, in some cases, getting beat up, getting thrown in jail, and then fighting back in court and beating these cops up in return. Sometimes getting them arrested, getting security guards arrested, things like that happen fairly often. And what they do is establish a civil right to record in public, which is guaranteed by the First Amendment. So these guys run into problems all the time. So over the course of the next, probably about 45 minutes, I think, I'm going to show you real-world examples of what can be done with public records requests, public records digging in various activism areas. Some of it, I'll show an example or two, for example, that could apply to a trucker. And we're going to 90 West. So, let's start out. What are we doing here? Well, the way the public records request laws are written, most of them are patterned in each state after the federal Freedom of Information Act, the FOIA. So that one's kind of the granddaddy of all of these things. And most states have some kind of a local clone of the FOIA system with their own little twist on board most of the time. So my first recommendation, and what these, well, let's start with this. What these are supposed to do is give you the right to examine or copy or get copies of government documents, because all those government documents were created with taxpayer money and they are owned by we the people. Training problem. Having an issue with this thing. Anyway, so those documents are literally public, literally accessible by you. Go in, walk in, and ask for them. Well, generally, you want to do so on paper, in writing. And each agency typically will have a form laying around. By agency, I mean whichever government bureaucracy, group, organization, department, whatever it is, whoever's holding the records that you think exist or you're interested in, they're the ones you ask for the records. Okay, so, and sometimes you'll find that they're held by a different group than you think. You got to go to a couple of different places. That happens, part of the game, ain't no big deal. So, you're going to go for a public record. Well, some records are not public. For example, if there's an active police investigation going on, they're not going to give you the contents of that. sometimes personnel, disciplinary records, government records on another citizen, something like somebody's medical records or somebody's, all kinds of things might be hidden. Some things aren't, like somebody else's criminal record. You can go after that. That could be interesting sometimes. So, the first thing you're doing is looking for documents that are in an agency's, department's, whatever, possession. What you're not allowed to do is ask them to create you a document. Okay? This is not like a court deposition or what they call in the court interrogatories. Interrogatory is part of a court process where you can ask them questions in writing and they have to respond under oath in writing. Okay, well, it's not quite like that. Before I go any further, let me tell you just a hair about myself. I wasn't always a trucker. I've been a political activist for a lot of years, going back to about 1997, arguably 1996, long story. And when I started learning about public records, working with them, I was not Jim Simpson. I was Jim March. Last name M-A-R-C-H. First name technically James. That hasn't changed. Everybody calls me Jim. That's normal. I did not have a middle name back then. Now, in early 2013, I married a fellow political activist named Dana Jo Simpson, my lovely wife, and I took her last name. I know, weird. So, I'm now Jim Simpson, or James March Simpson, if you want to be totally accurate about it. And the reason I say that is not to brag. I'm telling you, if you're looking to look up my history in self-defense rights activism, what some people call gun rights activism, I have an extensive history there. Have an even more extensive history, I'd say by now, in electronic voting research and investigative journalism. I'm an old computer tech from way back, and I know a thing or two about how electronic voting machines work, and it ain't pretty. So I've done some pretty extensive digging there. I invented a lot of the techniques used to go after the electronic debris from an electronic election. And a lot of my best work in new ideas in public records came from those days. So if you're looking to figure out my credentials or whatever, you need to know about the whole name change thing, which is fine. Okay, let's get into it. So, you got some government agency that's holding some document that you want your mitts on. Okay, so you walk in there, and 9 times out of 10, they've got some form that they want you to fill out. Sounds fine, but you don't want to use that. You want to walk in there with a form in hand that you created, for reasons I'll get into. You see, what you have to list is definitely the responding agency. So, right at the top, public records request. That language will work it might not be quite right for every state, but it should work okay in every state. All right? You should look up the public records laws for your state, whatever state you're operating in for this, because they do vary. And I'm going to show you a couple of variants before we're done. But you walk into there with a document you created. It says public records request all the way across the top. Okay. Below that, responding agency, who they are. Okay. Next, I would say go ahead and give your name. Okay. Proper name. Although you could give a fake name and create an email account on some free email account system, whatever you want, tons of them, that is specifically for these public records digging. So you say, I'm John Q. Citizen, and my email address is jqcitizen23 at whatever. Doesn't matter. Okay. And then you give your email address. And you don't give anything else about yourself. Now, this is the key, one of the key things I'm going to tell you about public records digging. Do not give them your snail mail address. Why? Because you want to operate at the speed of email and not the speed of paper in an envelope in U.S. mail allegedly sent to your house. No. You want to operate electronically. So the only contact you give them is your phone number. Optional. But I would recommend it unless you think you're dealing with a serious pack of crooks. That can happen. All right. You want to give them your email address, maybe phone number, maybe not, and your name. And that's all they need. Now, they might have their own form laying around that asks for a whole bunch more, but guess what? There's no law in any state public record system I've ever seen that requires you to use their form or requires you to give any more information. So that's my first big tip. Okay. Then in this form, continuing down, you describe what you're looking for. Okay? And it can range all over the map, guys. It could be one of my favorites. If you've got a particular government agent who's a screwball, okay? Sergeant John Goofy of the something police department. Okay. So you can go and file a records request with the IT department of his agency, or the county IT department probably runs the email system. And you can say, give me all emails that Sergeant Goofy has sent or received for the past year. What? Yes. This is called the broad net approach. Okay? The broad net approach means you're going to grab a whole bunch more documents than just what you're looking for. The advantage is the bad guys don't know exactly what you're digging for and they don't know what to hide. Whereas if you say, give me all emails to or from Sergeant Goofy that involve the name, certain person's name. Maybe it's yours, maybe it's not. It doesn't matter. But the point is, then they know what you're looking for, and they can doctor documents, they can hide documents, they can do all kinds of things. Now, what's their defense to a broad net approach? Well, the first thing is they're going to say, oh, well, it's $1.50 a page to print this stuff out and hand it to you on paper. Well, guess what? You do not. I repeat, you do not want dead tree paper if you can possibly get a hold of it. So one of the things that is stapled or taped to your public records request document is, guess what? You'll love this one. Go down to Best Buy or Staples or go to Amazon or whatever and get a USB memory stick. 32 gig, 64 gig, something like that, depending on roughly how much crap you expect to get. Tape it to your records request or staple it in its original factory sealed packaging. And use something name brand like, what are the good ones? Oh, I can't even think off the top of my head. But SanDisk, some brand name. Okay? Lexar, fine. Whatever you want. Whatever's cheap. Okay? You know, don't blow the budget on this. Although I have done public records digging using this trick where it's not a memory stick attached. This was 2 years ago, granted. It was a 500 gig external hard disk that the records request is taped to. Oh yeah. Okay? Give me all that stuff. Now what happens is their usual trick of so much a page for printouts. Oh, guess what? That doesn't happen no more. Right? Now, to produce those emails in, say, PST format for a year or two, whatever, for Sergeant Goofy, only takes 15 minutes, half an hour of a text time. This is not a big money operation here. Not at all. Starting to see some interesting ideas, aren't we? So, the next thing you do, you describe exactly what you want, and you got to decide between broad net approach or fine-tuned approach. And there's things to be said for either for your specific situation. One of the weirdest, you can have a situation where you're going after a public record that they should have but don't. So what you want from them is, we have no records responding to your request. You want that. You're thinking, what? I want public records. No, not necessarily. Because if they have a fiduciary duty or some other legal responsibility to have a particular record, they don't got it? Something's wrong, isn't it? Oops. Yeah, exactly. So, and I busted a major scam with that particular trick. So when we get to real world examples, oh yeah, we're going to have fun with that one. Okay. Describe in detail what you're looking for. Now, one of the things you can do is ask for a record that will be created but doesn't exist yet. In which case, you got to say that. You got to lay it out. Hey, I'm asking for this. I know it will exist as of this and this date, or it can legally be released to me on this and this date, and I want it then. I can't get it now. I know that. Don't worry about it. I want it then. Classic example. On election night, the main database for an election that controls all the votes in the county becomes legally releasable at the close of polls, but not before. Because before polls close, it's got mail-in votes that are to be held secret, or supposed to be held secret anyway, prior to the close of polls, but after they're public record. Okay, well, you can specify that. You better specify dates and times and what you're talking about. There was an actual court case in Arizona that was really interesting. It involves our old buddy Sheriff Joe Arpaio, biggest dick in law enforcement for many years. So this guy was sending out regular bulletins about crimes in various neighborhoods. Like this particular neighborhood, there's some guy running around with a dead halibut, whacking people over the head with it. We don't know why. We'd like to catch this guy. And a lot, in all seriousness, we're also talking about murderers. We're talking about rapists. We're talking about serious threats to the community. Okay. So what he would do is he would give these regular bulletins out to local newspapers, unless a particular local newspaper was not sufficiently agreeing that Joe Arpaio is a cool guy. So newspapers and particular reporters that were critical of him, they wouldn't get these broadcasts. So one of the reporters that was on his, let's say, crap list, said, I want these records when they are created, and I want them in my email box the same time you send them out to all these other, you send them in the future out to all these other newspapers. And he said, oh, you can't do that. Well, they took him to court, and the Arizona Supreme Court said, yeah, you can ask for a record in the future that you know will exist in the future, and work on that basis. Interesting trick for us, right? In some cases. Okay. So we've covered broad sweep versus narrow, fine-tuned analysis. Now, when you're doing paper records, one of the things the bad guys can do in a particular county, if they're corrupt, if they're trying to hide things, they'll take every document that is even possibly slightly related in some way to what you're asking about and dump it on you and charge a $1,000 copying fee, and you end up with this massive stack of dead paper. Okay? This is one of the classic abuses on the other side of the public record law. Alright? Well, it's not right when they do things like that. Sometimes you'll get some cool stuff if you're willing to go through and pay for those papers and dig through them. Hell, you might get lucky and find they put in something seriously damning. Okay? But probably not, honestly. So, one of the ways you eliminate that problem is by, in your records request, once you've documented what thing you're looking for, things, it could be multiple items, it's fine. Your records request could run 10 pages if you need to. Then at the end, before you sign it at the bottom, you say, I want these records in electronic form only, in their original file format. I do not want them on paper. I most certainly do not want you to print the electronic records to paper and then scan the paper, because that will destroy the metadata attached to the data I'm looking for. Metadata, what is that? You see, when you create a computer record, the operating system attaches other information to the file, such as last time it was accessed, who created it, when was it created, when was it last accessed, when was it last modified. This is metadata. Okay, it's data about data. If it's a Microsoft Word document, there's two different levels of metadata in that bastard. First is the operating system level one, and the way you get to that is you pull up something like file properties in Windows or Linux. It's generally called properties or file properties. On the Mac, I think it's like about file, about this file. It's the same thing. But once you load the document into a copy of Microsoft Word or equivalent, you can use LibreOffice, it works just as well on a doc file or docx. You can then pull up file document properties inside the program, and you get a whole bunch of stuff like the name of the person who created it. So you can have a situation where some guy goes on TV and says, I was never involved in this situation, and then a week later you're holding a document about that situation. It's literally got his name on it. Oh, that's a great one. And it happens. Stuff like that happens. Okay, so metadata, that's another thing. There's yet another Arizona Supreme Court case. I did a lot of this in Arizona, so I know about those. Saying that, yes, metadata is a valid part of a public record. Okay? Interesting. So, and other courts elsewhere across the country are realizing the same things. Okay? The same logic applies elsewhere. Okay. So in your concluding your public records request, you specify that I'm only looking for electronic records. If the records exist only in paper, call me or email me and we'll talk about whether I want it, what it is, and how much it'll cost me. You literally use that kind of phrasing. Okay? Otherwise, just take my USB memory stick that I just attached to the records request and fill her up. Mass copy, dump it all, give it to me. Now, if you've got 10,000 or more pages worth of electronic material, if you know what you're doing, you can use software that will mass search that stuff across multiple files, looking for the name of the particular, well, maybe it's your name, or name of a particular activist that got screwed, or the name of a particular victim of a crime, or the name of a particular place where something horrible went down. Whatever. Electronic data is alive in a way that a paper dead tree document is not. An electronic record, you can copy from it, extract information out, put it in your own document, quote it from it, real easy without retyping anything. And most of all, you can search it. You can look for a particular issue, name, keyword, whatever you want. So electronic documents are worth 1,000 times more than dead trees. You don't want dead trees. Okay, so we've gone over how to create a public records request that works a lot better than your average one. Okay? We've covered several tricks. Now let's talk tactics and specific examples. One of the funniest tactics you can use this for, I guess you could almost say you could abuse it, the public records process, that is, by doing what I call forced re-education camp for bureaucrats. Okay? So let's take a real-world example, and this is just hypothetical, I'm not taking a specific case, but you're a cop watcher in Texas, you point your camera at some cops somewhere, and they get all uppity and in your face, they don't like that, or you're some kind of terrorist, or they come up with all kinds of stuff. They don't like you. They do not like you pointing cameras at them 9 times out of 10. So they come charging up to you and say, I want your ID, because we're going to search you through all our criminal databases, and we're going to dig up your past, and we're going to find out what you're about. Well, in Texas and most other states, vast majority of those states, they can't do that without reasonable suspicion that some kind of crime is being committed by you. Pointing a camera at a cop, not a crime. It's a First Amendment protected activity. So, you then say, hey, I don't have to give you my name or ID because it's not legally required. I haven't committed any crime. You don't suspect me of any crime. You just want to dig. You can't go on that kind of fishing expedition. You know, papers, please is not an American phrase. It's Nazi Germany. No. And then things snowball from there. Maybe they just go away pissed, or maybe you end up in handcuffs in the back of a cop car. Or worst case, stripped naked in a padded cell somewhere. Oh, it's happening. So things go bad. All right. After the fact, you want to educate that department on what's going on. Well, if you walk in there, talk to them, and say, this was wrong, and they say, no, it's not. Your first inclination, if you're thinking about this, might be, well, you know, these guys have got lawyers. The county, especially a county agency, for example, or any kind of big city, will have their own lawyers around, which you would think you'd be able to walk in there and say, hey, these guys are doing something completely wrong. In the case of demanding ID, when you haven't committed a crime, they're in violation of a Fifth Circuit precedent in the case of Turner v. Driver a few years ago. You can look up the citation, but three-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit, so it's standing rules across the entire Fifth Circuit, which includes Texas. It's a Texas case. There has to be an actual reason for them to get your ID, not a fishing expedition, and that means they suspect you of committing a crime or about to commit a crime. If they don't have that, no ID. So you should be able to talk to their lawyers and say, hey, they're doing things wrong. They're in violation of Turner v. Driver. This is wrong. Can you go talk to them? You can't do that. I'll tell you right now, you cannot get in and talk to their lawyer except for one thing. When you file a public records request, guess who reviews it? Some junior attorney in that law office. Yeah, you heard me right. So, you can craft a public records request that says, show me all documents in terms of your policies regarding getting ID off of people who have not committed any specific crime in light of the court case, Turner v. Driver, Fifth Circuit three-judge panel opinion from a few years back. Show me all policy manuals that discuss that situation from within that, let's say, sheriff's office or police department, whatever's going on. Show me all documents related to that, and especially any documents that might have been seen by Deputy Asshole that was the main one hassling him and his buddies. Right. Now, maybe that document exists and maybe it doesn't. Okay? Oh, by the way, yes, and I want all documents that mention this video that I put on YouTube showing them being such assholes about this same situation. So what happens? Junior attorney in the same law department, law office you wanted to talk to, goes and looks up what Turner v. Driver is, and he goes, that's interesting. And then he sees the video you took of these guys being complete and utter jackasses. And he goes, oh shit. And then he pulls up the arrest report when you got arrested for this. He puts all this together and he goes, oh God. Hey sheriff, the police chief or whatever, get on the phone. We got a problem. This guy's going to sue the living crap out of us if we're not careful here. So, the exact result you wanted, where you could not walk in and talk to that lawyer in person, I'll give you these a public records request because it's a document that they have to look at, they have to mentally process, and they have to respond to. They're legally required to respond to. Well, heck, that's a two-way street, isn't it? That's not just information out, that's also information in. Tell me that can't be useful in some circumstances. I call it the forced re-education camp for bureaucrats version of a public records request. Whether I actually get anything out of them or not, I don't care at that point. That's not the point of that kind of records request. Oh boy. Aren't we having fun yet? Let's talk about some real world examples. Talk about the time I destroyed 3 nonprofit organizations with 1 public records request. So what happened is in the year 2000, a lady named Nadja Adolf, and that's her real last name of my birth, proper, came across the website of a gun control organization in San Francisco. And they were called the Trauma Foundation. They had gotten free medical office space at San Francisco General Hospital, which is owned by the city and county of San Francisco. They're both a city and a county if you rolled into one. Don't worry about it. All kinds of things are weird in San Francisco. So, this medical charity had gotten 4,500 square feet, if I recall right, 4,500 square feet of medical office space to run their medical charity in. They had started out worried about cigarettes and cancer. We're going to do something about smoking, and that just didn't work out for them because pretty much everybody is going to quit smoking for health purposes. Has done so by now, pretty much. I mean, it's an open secret. You know, cancer sticks and kill you. So that wasn't going anywhere for them. So they switched to gun control. And they ran with that. Then they formed 2 spin-off groups. One was the Million Mom March, which was still set up, same as Trauma Foundation, as a 501c3 non-political charity. Okay, so tax deductible, which meant they were set up with the IRS, that if you give them $10,000, you can claim $10,000 loss on your taxes, and effectively get a certain percentage of it back off the federal government, depending on your tax bracket, depending on other factors. Okay, so gods, this guy's got a mattress in the on the roof of his car. It's about to go flying off. Okay, so how do you cause accidents? So, the Trauma Foundation formed the Million Mom March 501c3, same as Trauma Foundation, which pushed the borders of what you could do as a nonprofit, tax-deductible 501c3, but within the bounds of the law. So it was plausible for city and county of San Francisco to give these guys free office space for years. There's a lot of money involved, attention. It was a little sketchy, but not horrible. All right. Then they screwed up. Then they formed a 501c4 non-tax deductible, fully political organization. Okay? And they shared the free resources they got off the city and county of San Francisco. Under non-political status, they shared it with the political board. Oops, nope, can't do that. Cannot do that. So, I filed a public records request to the San Francisco General Hospital. It says, tell me everything you know about a 501c4 political organization getting free office space at address such and such, suite such and such. And by the way, take a look at this website where they show their 501c4 status, and this website where they show their address of record for the 501c4 political org. In light of this, show us whatever records you have about this situation. What do I get back from the hospital? We have no records pertaining to this subject. Oh, really? Well, how did they respond? within 24 hours, all three groups, Trauma Foundation, Million Mile March 501c3, and Million Mile March 501c4, did a midnight move. So, vacated, gone, out of there. And they ended up going out of business. Sold the Million Mile March brand name to the Brady campaign on the East Coast gun control group, where I believe they still operate it as a brand name for donations for people who still remember that crap, but it's defunct, the whole thing. There was a fourth branch of the group that was their Lawyers Against Guns group. That's right, Legal Community Against Violence, LCAV, was based in somebody's law office in downtown San Francisco. Well, that was a private company that could give them resources, so that was above board. So those guys hung around for at least a few years. They might still be around in some form, I don't know, but that is the last functional group that was the last functional portion of this West Coast gun control cluster. But all the rest died out, sold brand names to the East Coast cluster, which I guess is still around. So, killed three corrupt, enemy. One still definitely corrupt. And, the other two were as well, because they gave the political one resources from the two non-political ones. A whole bunch of corrupt. Anyway, got rid of them all. And that made me kind of a rock star in the California gun rights circles. Didn't last, okay, because the other thing I was doing with public records digging is I was proving that sheriffs, in particular, up and down the state, were selling gun permits for campaign contributions. And by 2002, the NRA said, hey, Jim, you need to stop going after Republican sheriffs that are screwing us. I said, what? Yeah, the Republicans in the legislature don't want you screwing over Republican sheriffs, even though they're corrupt. So we want you to stop doing that. And I told them to zip a rope. So that's how I got thrown out of the NRA for being too radical. That's a claim very few people do. Okay. So, other examples. Well, let's switch to trucking for a second, okay? So, the U.S. Department of Transportation deputizes various local cops in each state with federal regulatory powers over truckers, okay? It's weird. Don't worry about it. So if you're a trucker that gets pulled into what we call a chicken coop, also known as a scale house by the side of the freeway or by the road, you get pulled in there, they weigh your truck, and sometimes they pull you in and inspect you. And some of these DOT certified officers, is what we got, DOT certified officers, are just nasty. They will search your truck from one end to the other, looking for anything they could possibly put a bust on. Some of them you can actually, if you're smart, you have your cell phone in a little belt holder thing, and you covertly turn on audio and video recording, and you record the entire interaction with these guys. Highly recommend it. Oh, definitely do that. And you'll actually catch them saying things, well, I got to bust you for something. No, you don't. God. All right, so let's say you get one that's real bad, and he looks at your logbook. So you got now it's an electronic logbook showing where you've been, what you've done each day, going back 14 days. He looks at it and he sees something he thinks is slightly funky. Okay, so he wants to be nasty. The worst thing he can do to you is write you up for violation of logs, but warning only. Not an actual ticket, a warning only. That's nastier than the actual ticket. What? Well, yeah, here's what happens. The warning only still goes on your record that tracks what truckers do wrong. Okay, it's called the CSA system, which, what does that stand for again? Compliance, Safety, and Accountability, if I recall right. CSA. So you have every trucker in America has a CSA score. And falsified logbook, woohoo, it's way up there, man. Bad one. And because it's a warning only, you can't appeal it. You have no appeal ground. Because you weren't convicted of a crime, But the warning went into your CSA scores and jacked them up to the point where you might not ever be employable for the next year or two. Okay? It's that bad. Or worse, instead of being actually thrown out of trucking and you go do something else, you have to report this to your current boss. Your current boss is because he's got you. He knows you can't go anywhere else and likely get hired because you got this horrible black mark on your record. It may or may not be your fault. Probably not. He knows that with that you can't go anywhere else, so you are his biatch. He can put you in the crappiest truck he's got with no air conditioning and the springs poking out of the seat and run you like a dog and give you ugly loads at meat packing plants that smell like Satan's underwear after a 3-day Taco Bell binge and not give you enough miles, and you're sitting waiting too long at crappy shippers and receivers, and life just generally sucks and there's nothing you can do about it. Okay? Well, if you're faced with something like that, I would say there is something you can do about it. It's called public records digging. What? Well, remember the trick where we crawl the emails for one of these, for a cop for a period of years? Well, I would do one records request first that asked for paper records, just showing the chain of command in that office, that portion of the probably State Department of Motor Vehicles is typically who you're dealing with. State Department of Motor Vehicles showing what rank is this particular cop who jacked you around and what his boss is and what his boss's boss is. Okay? Then you go after the last, 2 or 3 years worth of emails for Officer Jackass, whoever that is, and his boss, going back a couple of years. We want all their emails, all of it. And then a meeting will be held in their offices saying, man, what exactly did you do to piss this guy off? What's going on here? Oh, well, he was being an asshole. Wait a minute. Hold on. Is this kind of a scorched earth thing? Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it may be all you can do. It may be all that's left in a situation like that. And that's pretty much a worst case scenario. Any situation where you can hire a lawyer to correct your record in some way or avoid a really major horrible ticket, you should do that. Traffic lawyers are surprisingly cheap and can fix all kinds of crap. You should do that before taking a really serious ticket in this business. The penalties, the records and such for a trucker, for traffic stuff, doesn't even bear thinking about. Okay, so yeah, you can do scorched earth record digging. If you get the records, you can go back and look at all the times when they laughed at truckers, where they passed around memes of how bad truckers are. Show a pattern of bias and sue them for slanderous report. I mean, especially if you can catch them chuckling to themselves about how they screwed you, that'd be great. Might happen. Worth a shot at that point, I'd say. So, oh yes, let's go to Tennessee. What? Okay. Tennessee is one of the handful of states that are screwed up because they only allow you to file a records request under the state public record system if you are a Tennessee resident. What? Yeah. So that's one exception to the don't give your address rule. Okay? Doing a Tennessee public records request, if you're a Tennessee resident, well, you're going to have to give your address that time. But just tell them, I want to communicate in email, not in paper. May or may not work. They'll probably use paper anyway, just to slow your ass down. So, you got this problem of you're not a Tennessee resident. Now, if whatever you're doing records digging on, now let's say you're a resident of Alabama, and you want to do a records request in Tennessee. it's probably not going to work unless you can show that you're digging for records that really affect you personally. I don't think you're going to be able to do societally beneficial records digging, like into election law stuff or environmental stuff, unless, let's say, there's a creek runs past your house in Alabama 100 yards over the border, maybe a mile over the border, but there's some kind of crap being dumped into that creek by somebody on the Tennessee side, and you want to do public records digging for that. I would try it, because there is a general prohibition put in place by the Supreme Court that says a state cannot discriminate against visiting residents of other states. What am I talking about? The U.S. Supreme Court cases involved are Ward v. Maryland. It's a guy named Ward v. Maryland, 1870. This is a case where a guy named Ward was a merchant from New Jersey selling horse and buggy equipment of some sort in Maryland, and Maryland had a special extra tax they were putting on out-of-state merchants coming into Maryland from elsewhere in the U.S., not overseas, from elsewhere in the U.S. And this guy sued him over that, went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, the state of Maryland cannot discriminate on that basis. And you'd think, oh, that's old extinct case law. Well, 1999, Saenz v. Roe, that's S-A-E-N-Z v. R-O-E, guess what? Same kind of thing. Somebody from, I believe it was Missouri, but I can't remember, some southern state, had moved to California and applied for welfare. California had a rule that says you're only going to get the welfare benefits that you would have got in the state you came from. It's about a third of what they were wanting to give a California longer-term resident. Went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says discrimination like that, not cool, can't do it. Same kind of reasoning as Ward v. Maryland. So, with those on the books and valid case law, the state of Tennessee can't discriminate against you. And that could be vital in a public records request. I don't know if there's other states that have a Tennessee-style rule like that, where records requests are only for people in state. Now let's talk about a much better one. This one's lovely. Colorado and Washington State. Now, they weren't just pioneers in pot legalization, which is fine for them, no problem, but they also pioneered the idea that if a government agent is asked for a record that they legally have to give up, it doesn't fall under one of the exceptions, such as police investigators' notes or whatever. There's usually some exceptions. It doesn't fall under those exceptions. They were required to give it to you, but they didn't. They took it to court, or they just stalled, or whatever. There's a penalty per day, cash payable to you, for every day that they illegally withheld those records. Isn't that nice? I know of at least one guy who put himself through college with no student loan debt by just filing creatively worded records requests in Washington State, got denied, took him to court, got paid. Oh, he did it over and over again. He's lost it. He made a bunch of money that way. There's other states that do that. So that's one of the things you got to look at. When you get into this, you got to say, am I dealing with a state where wrongful denial has penalties? And some of the times the penalties are not payable by the state or the agency in general. They're payable by the particular human being who decided to deny you the records. Ain't that fun? Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, definitely. I made $8,000 once on one of these in what was it? In Arizona. Oh, wait a minute. Was that public records, or was that? I did so much stuff in Arizona. It was a writ of mandamus on election law. It wasn't public records request. It wasn't public records. No, but I made $8,000 in one of these. So, yeah. Some of this stuff sometimes. The most money I ever made in a civil rights lawsuit in the election field was $76,000 in one payday. Took 2 years to get it, a lot of work. And myself and a lady named Bev Harris each collected $76,000. Here's the crazy part. That was based on 6.5% of what we got back payable to the state that was fraudulently obtained by a voting system company called Diebold Election Systems. Well, Diebold should have had to pay back $106 million, and I should have collected 6.5% of $106 million in 2005. Oh, I'm pissed about that one because the California Attorney General's office settled it out from under us for dirt and cheap. It's called a key tam case. Oh, God, I should have been a millionaire in 2005, swear to God, guys. Man, I'd have myself one hell of a truck right now. No, I probably wouldn't be driving a truck at all. Anyway, so, yes, life of an activist can be kind of fun sometimes. I'm about to finish up. I think you get the idea. But the whole point here is the public record digging can do all kinds of useful things and dig up all kinds of cool dirt beyond what most people use it for. And a lot of people don't understand the power of electronic records digging as opposed to paper, and how you can separate those, and how you can radically cut your costs and your investigation time on your part by attaching a USB memory stick right to your request. Factory sealed, remember, so they can't accuse you of planting a buggy on the memory stick. No, the original factory sealed. Stapled or taped to your record request. And you just say, yeah, put it all on this. Fill her up. Thank you. High octane. Good stuff. Have fun with all this. And hope that this radically increases your ability to fight back against corrupt, goofy, stupid, or plain illegal or unconstitutional government agents, one sort or another. God knows there's lots of them. Public records is how you fight back. In my opinion, the fact that you weren't taught anything at all about public records in your high school civics class is proof that there's people in government somewhere who don't want you to be able to effectively complain about misconduct against you. They don't want you able to be an effective political activist, especially not kids in the high school, college age. Oh, Lord, no. No. That's not good. Have fun. Have lots of fun. Jim Simpson, formerly Jim Mark, signing off.